Ah, yes, the panic index. Welcome back, everybody. So, the panic index, as it is, I could leave it like this, couldn't I? Where just the NHL logo right next to panic and go, all right, talk to y'all after the holiday. But no, I think that what we're dealing with right now is a very temporary stoppage and a reset, and a look at how they're going to do things going forward from here. And so I'm going to do a panic index as I normally would. There is no set timeline for the panic indexes this year. I apologize for that. Normally there is. Normally there would be that set time, but this year's just been kind of a little bit bonkers. So obviously you have the very happy fans right now, very happy with the way their team's performing. You have the panicked fans. You have the everything's fine. We're losing, but it's good because we're going to get a top draft pick anyways, and then wake us up when the playoffs start. I think we're far enough along into the season now that I can start putting this up here, and it's either going to be this or it's going to be the Stanley Cup magnet. And so basically, it's all right, just let us know when the playoffs start because that's when the hockey's important. That's when, because what they're doing right now is great and everything, but wake us up later. So obviously, the line here is for above. Everybody should be happy. Relative degrees of, and relative degrees of panic. So these are in a random order. I'm going to apologize because there's going to be people who don't like it. Columbus. Columbus is just, for me, it's just below the line. I don't think that there's going to be a lot of panic in Columbus. Remember, they weren't supposed to be a playoff team this year anyways. So the wins, they staying competitive, staying in the hunt. This is all a bonus for Columbus, right? A team that was supposed to be falling apart. And they just never quite do. So, yeah, we'll see whether or not Columbus jumps up over top of the line in coming weeks. But at this point, Columbus, I'm happy with them there. Anaheim. Anaheim, honestly, I'm going to put them right about here. I'm not going to put them in jubilant happy. They're still tied for first in the division. If I had the things are getting weird magnet up, I think I'd have Anaheim right about there. Because it is odd. They're not supposed to be this competitive. They're not supposed to be this entertaining and have a dynamic offense and have a really good power play. Things with the Ducks are bizarre, and yet their fans, I think, are mostly very happy with what's going on right now. I don't know how far it goes. I've started to see people saying, well, I'm a believer they're a playoff team. Maybe. And to me, it's still a maybe because there's other teams in the division that have been underperforming. And so once everything straightens out, we'll see if they're still above the playoff line. But the fact we're even talking about it is a victory for the Anaheim Ducks. Vancouver Canucks. So, last time I did this, right down on the panic line. Canuck fans, I'm going to put them right with Anaheim. I'm not going to put them in the jubilant category. They've won 6 in a row under Boudreau. But I think while there's some happiness in Canuck land, I don't think it's unbridled. I don't think it's short-sighted. I think the fans realize that eventually the Canucks are going to lose a game or two. Eventually they're going to have some problems. And making the playoffs is still quite the challenge. And so for the Canucks, they have a lot of work to do. So I think the fans are quite happy with the way things are going under Boudreau. I think they're ecstatic that things have finally been changed in Vancouver. They finally moved on from the Benning and the Travis Green era. And how successful they're going to be with Rutherford and Boudreau still remains to be seen. But at least there's some optimism, right? Seattle. I'm going to put Seattle below the line. I'm going to put Seattle below Columbus. I think with Seattle, I think, again, it's just the reality that putting together a team for that first year and having a team that's competitive and can make the playoffs is difficult. It's not that easy. And I keep seeing people saying, well, they had good expansion draft rules and they should be, at least good. A lot of what Vegas did that first year was through trade. A lot of it was through trade because general managers were terrified of losing one good player, and so they would make a trade where they're trading extra assets. Seattle didn't get that, and so the other route too is that Ron Francis not at the cap, not trying to be at the cap, leaving that cap space flexibility, which he can weaponize at the trade deadline. And I guarantee, with what's going on right now, with the likelihood that this is going to impact the NHL negatively going forward financially, Seattle's going to be in an even better position. Keep that cap space. Teams with cap space, that's absolute gold. So on the ice, it's underwhelming. On the ice, their goaltending has been at best unpredictable, and at worst, it's cost them games. But Seattle, I still think that long term, I think they're looking at the long term picture with what they've built and what they're building. Winnipeg, I'm going to put Winnipeg right about the same as Columbus. And again, for Winnipeg, I had expected more out of them. I was really surprised that the struggles have taken place as they have. They're still in a good spot in order to make a push for a playoff spot. Of course, whether or not they get there is a whole other story. But Paul Maurice stepping aside might end up being a good thing for them. If they win under Dave Lowry, it probably wins him the right to be their coach going forward. And so we'll see with Winnipeg. Again, I've got them below, so more towards the panic side, but not a crazy amount. I think Maurice stepping aside, I think, has probably decreased some of that pressure. Minnesota. If I had done this a week ago, Minnesota would have been right up at the top. I can't really put them at the top. I'll put them over top of Anaheim and Vancouver. The loss last night against Dallas, it didn't feel like either of those teams were into it. So, I mean, you can read something into that. They've dropped in the power rankings from where they were on Saturday. However, I still think they're in an excellent position to potentially win the division and maybe go on a run in the playoffs, which no Minnesota team has done in a long time. 2003, the last time they made it to the conference final. That was also the only time they made it to the conference final. It'd be nice to see long-suffering fans in Minnesota, just in sports in general, not just even NHL, but sports in general, see them get rewarded with some kind of a run, and maybe a championship. New York Rangers. Rangers fans still, I would think, quite happy. I'm going to put them on an even keel with Minnesota. And I'll drop Vancouver down just a little bit. I'll friendly giant this around a little so everything all fits in nicely. Rangers fans, I think, are rightfully excited about what's going on. I think they've got an excellent team. I think they had an excellent team last year too, and so we're seeing this year finally that next step, which again I think makes it look like they made an interesting move in the offseason firing everybody when I don't think they had to. I think the team was going to do this anyways, but all right. LA Kings, depends on the day. It really depends on the day. I'm going to put them above the line for the same reason as Anaheim's above the line. Closer to the line, but still above the line. They're competitive. They're in the hunt. They're in the running. All that. They weren't supposed to be, not yet. And so for the Kings, I do have them above the line. I think that this year has been a pretty good one. If they miss the playoffs and say, I don't know, win the draft lottery, boy, Shane Wright with the Kings, that could be a pretty interesting combo right there if he was drafted by the Kings. And if they won the draft lottery, people would complain. Guaranteed. But that's how that works. So yeah, for the LA Kings, I think it's been a pretty good run, honestly. And I don't know how far it goes. I don't know if they're going to be able to make a push for the playoffs because they have those bad games still sprinkled in there that makes you wonder. But yeah, they're winning enough to stay in the hunt. Nashville. Nashville is, I think, rightfully right now pretty happy with how things are going. Nashville wasn't supposed to make the playoffs. They weren't expected to be where they are right now, certainly. Now, I don't know if Nashville can keep this up and make the playoffs, but they should. With where they are right now in the standings, they're only 1 point back in Minnesota. They should make the playoffs at the very least. And then who knows, right? The Central could be really crazy in the playoffs as to who's going to actually make it out of there. Everybody would have picked Colorado before the season. You probably still would be picking Colorado now, but with the questionable goaltending at times, I don't know. I don't know if they're there. Pittsburgh fans right now, pretty darn happy too. Nice long winning streak going into their unexpected break. And now they're going to get Malkin back not long from now. Pittsburgh's pretty happy. I mean, I would be half tempted to put them over here with Wake Me when the playoffs start. But Pittsburgh's supposed to be in decline. Supposed to be. That's been predicted for the last couple of years. It hasn't happened. Kind of reminds me of Detroit towards the end of their playoff run. There were always expectations Detroit was going to fall off, and they didn't. Boston. Boston's definitely below the line for me. The goaltending, for the most part, I think it gets more criticism than is deserved. But the blue line, I have questions. Scoring depth, absolute questions there. And it is alarming, the drop when Marchand's out of the lineup in terms of their overall attack and their offense. So I do have some concerns with Boston. I do put them on the panic side of things. They have games in hand. They should be able to make the playoffs. But if they make the playoffs and get destroyed in round one, Boston fans won't be happy. So for Boston, I definitely think there's some panic. I think there's some moves that need to be made. And we'll see what Don Sweeney does. Philadelphia. Philadelphia, much like Vancouver, I think that the expectation when they finally did fire Alain Vigneault was that they might have a bit of a bounce, which they have. Philadelphia is a tough one for me. I kind of feel like they're leaning towards that's fine, we'll wait till whatever. But instead, I'm going to put them right a little bit below the line. Because they have won some games lately and they're still in the hunt. So the season's not over for them. And so I'm not going to put them on this side where we don't really care that we're losing. We're just waiting for the playoffs or for the expansion for the entry draft lottery. And this, of course, is you're waiting for the playoffs, but waiting for the draft lottery right here. And then, of course, the entry draft. So, in other words, whatever happens the rest of the season, we don't really care. I don't think Philly's there yet. I think Philly was getting close under Vigneault. Now they've had a bit of a bounce after Vigneault's gone. So, I mean, while it's still dodgy as to whether or not they're going to make the playoffs, I'm not going to put them over here yet. Just below the line, so they're still on the side of panic, but not total panic. So, may not need bags over their heads much longer. New Jersey. I'm going to put New Jersey in this category. I know the Devils were expected to get better, but I think it was well understood that in the Metro, as tough as that is, it was going to be a really tough task for the Devils to get into the playoffs. So for the Devils, I have them more towards the it's okay. I don't think there are very many Devils fans that are angry at their current standing. I don't think the losing streak makes them happy, but I think it's kind of to be expected. Adding Dougie Hamilton was a good move, and now it's a matter of the young core growing. Jack Hughes needs to stay healthy the rest of the season, and they need to make advancements in other areas. The wins will come later, but another top draft pick couldn't hurt, right? And they've still got Holtz on the way, and they've got others on the way too. So New Jersey's got a good young core right now, and they've got a lot of young guys coming up too. Islanders, I am torn on the Islanders. I'm not sure. So I'd be curious to know from the comment section where Islander fans are at. Are they more towards the side of panic, or do you look at the current standing and say, you know what, this season's probably done? So I'm going to cheat a little bit here. I'm going to put them more towards the panic side, but I'm going to put them halfway between panicked. It's okay. We're waiting for the expansion. I keep wanting to say expansion draft. There are no more expansion drafts, Shannon. You don't need to worry about expansion. But we're waiting for the entry draft lottery and the draft that follows. So I'm kind of torn as to where I think, and maybe it depends on the fans, right? Maybe some fans are panicked and thinking we got to turn this around and make the playoffs, and others are thinking, just get draft picks and it'll be fine next year. Arizona is right here. Everything's A-okay. Everything's fine because it's all according to plan. And then the tough part of the plan becomes, so when does this turn around? When do things start to get better? And that's when somebody may not have quite the answer. But for tearing it down, they're doing quite well. Capitals, I think there's some reason for a little bit of concern maybe here and there. But I'm going to put them in the same spot as the Rangers and Minnesota. A little bit of concerns here and there, but you're going to have those downbeats. And overall, I think Washington's still playing pretty well. So while they may not win every game, and then they don't win every game, I think they're winning often enough that, yeah, fans are pretty happy. So we got Washington there. Florida's slipped. Florida, I'm going to put down with the Kings. Florida's still got an excellent overall record, right? They're a playoff team, no doubt at all, none. However, Florida in recent weeks, it's been a little bit more of a slog. They've definitely dropped off standings wise. Their record hasn't been great, and so you have to wonder, starting on the 27th, when everybody comes back and starts playing again, fingers crossed, that you have to wonder with Florida. So what's going to happen, right? Like, where does this end up turning? So yeah, for Florida, I have them above the panic line. I don't think there's panic yet, but they need to turn this around before there's a reason for panic, because there's some teams in this division that have pretty good records in Toronto and Tampa. And Boston still could turn things around and get into that category too. Not that likely, but we'll see. And then there's this team here, Detroit. What is Detroit going to end up doing? I think Detroit fans are pretty happy. I'm going to put them with Anaheim and Vancouver because not expected to be this competitive this season, right? And they've been able to hold a wild card spot. And yes, they've played more games than teams below them. But the point of having those games in hand, you have to win them, right? So if you haven't won those games yet, they're not hurting Detroit. I think Detroit's pretty happy with where they're at. Even if they end up falling out of the playoff chase, I don't think people are going to be upset. Dallas. Oh, there's some panic in Dallas. I'm going to put them even with Boston. Now, they've won their last 2 games, which helps, right? They annihilate a Minnesota team that didn't look all that interested last night for point, at least defensively. And so that might help, but Dallas is so up and down, right? And the problem is that now you're in a league where 16 out of 32 teams make it. Those downbeats cost you the playoffs. And I'm not convinced that the downbeats Dallas is going through here and there won't cost them the playoffs. They need consistent offense, consistent goaltending, and they need a really good, solid 4-line approach to things, and they need for their veterans who are paid very highly to play like their contracts. So there are some concerns I have with Dallas. So what's interesting is we've got Vancouver above the line and Boston and Dallas below it. This is truly bizarre world. Vegas is quite happy. That's why I'm wearing the Vegas. Even it's a Marc-Andre Fleury jersey, and the $40 on NHL Shop, $40, sure, all right. I'll take a Fleury for $40. Regular jerseys are $200, and if it's got a name on the back, it's got $40. Math adds up. So. Vancouver's high up, but Vegas is higher. Vegas 5-game winning streak for them. They're scheduled to play tonight against Tampa. As I'm recording this, we'll see whether or not that actually goes through. But yeah, Vegas, it's a pretty good year they're having. The expectations are pretty high. They're right now first place in the division. They're tied for points with Anaheim, but they have the tiebreaker at Anaheim right now. So, yeah, things are getting to where it was supposed to be with Vegas, and they're getting healthier, too. Edmonton. I get the feeling there's some panic with Edmonton. I may be putting them in the wrong spot. I have them above the line. Barely, but I have them above the line. They're still in the playoffs. They're in a playoff spot. They've won their last couple of games. And that 6-game losing streak, as rough as that was, every team has those downbeats during the year. And I still think Edmonton should be a playoff team. And so I don't get the feeling there's a lot of panic. I think there's some concern about goaltending. I think there's some concern about, starting every game on time, playing a full 60. But again, I don't think there's necessarily panic with the Oilers. I'm not saying it's jubilant either, but I don't sense panic. St. Louis. St. Louis is pretty happy. St. Louis is pretty happy. I would think they're pretty satisfied with the way this season is going. And considering how many injuries they've been dealing with and how many people have been on the protocol list here and there, I think St. Louis is pretty happy with how things are going. Ottawa. Ottawa is here with New Jersey. The expectation was they'd get better. They really haven't. Now, their record lately has been better, but it's a woeful record that they have. But I don't sense panic regarding it because, again, this is a rebuild that I don't think is completely finished. It's close. It's not completely finished. So I have Ottawa here it's okay. Chicago. I don't think there's any panic with Chicago. I'm going to put Chicago down here in the it's okay category where I think we'll wait for the draft. We'll see how we do in the draft. I think they'll pick up draft picks at the deadline. I think for Chicago, I think fans realize, you look at the record, you look at the standings, you look at all the stats. The odds of them making the playoffs are very, very long indeed. And so I think at this point, I think Chicago and their fandom, I think they'll be in that it's fine kind of category. San Jose. San Jose is a tough call. I think right now, they're one up, one down a lot, but they've had some interesting setbacks against Vancouver and Seattle. I'm going to put them a little bit below the line because again, other teams are heating up like Vegas. Anaheim's staying competitive. Vancouver's turned things around. San Jose has to be worried about other teams passing them and maybe losing ground on teams ahead of them, and the playoff chase suddenly becomes more and more daunting. One thing with the NHL is once you get 8 or 10 points out of the playoffs, it's probably done. Historically, you'd see that at this point in the year, if you're 8 or 10 points out of the playoffs, you are highly likely to miss the playoffs. And of course, any further down than that, the odds are really, really long against you. So San Jose, I think there's got to be some concern with the way things have been going recently. Calgary's tough because this is where if I had my first aid magnets made up, and I have first aid magnets coming because, I mean, hey, why not, right? Calgary, I'm going to put them above the line because I don't think there's a reason for me to put them below the line yet. Now, with them being shut down for over a week, I think that throws a lot of uncertainty in the mix. Are they going to be able to pick up where they started the season really well, or are they going to have some regression to the kind of play they had last year where they ended up missing the playoffs? What's going to happen with Calgary? Which are the real Flames? So I don't see a reason to put them below the line. I don't see a reason to have them really high above the line. But, yeah. Tampa's waiting for the playoffs. Honestly, I don't think it matters what they do during the regular season. I think this season for them is all about playoffs. So I'm sure there's going to be somebody in the comments. I don't think he's putting anybody over there. Tampa's going over there. And while Tampa's going over there, so is Colorado. You know, I put all these in a random order. It's worked pretty well. Colorado, yeah, it's about playoffs. Whatever's happening during the regular season, that's great. That's great. Win all these games. Yep, awesome, great. All these wins are awesome. But it's not going to matter if they get knocked out in the first round or second round of the playoffs. They have to go on a long run this year. So I think that the regular season's nice, but it's all about what's going to happen in the playoffs. And that's where the concerns about goaltending become a little more of an issue. Toronto, also, wake us when the playoffs start. I think for Toronto, it's much the same thing as Colorado, right? Colorado, it's the second round that they can't get over. Toronto, of course, is that first round they haven't been out of since 2004. And that's a problem. That's something that they have to address and they have to fix. So for Toronto, it's great if they get all these wins in the regular season. It's great if they're near the top of a power rankings board. But the reality is Toronto absolutely needs a long run in the playoffs. If this team doesn't this year, they'd have to. And I said this last year too, so that's why I'm kind of rolling my eyes at saying it. But you would think they'd have to admit this team isn't maybe built correctly. We got to fix this. If they fall out in the first round again. But we'll see. Montreal's absolutely down here. It's okay. They're right down there with Arizona. I really don't think at this point there's any panic with Montreal. I know a jersey might hit the ice here and there. Whatever. It's fine. It happens. It's chic. It's in style now. Throw your jersey on the ice. You know. I could do a bad European accent for all this, but I'm just going to say no. My brain's saying no, don't do that. So yeah, Montreal is right now, I think, waiting on next year. And honestly, there's some really good young players here. I understand Cole Caulfield's had a rough rookie season, but I mean he's very young, and it takes time. And so I think that's what we're seeing with Caulfield. Buffalo is I'll put them with Chicago, Ottawa, and New Jersey, in that, you know, Buffalo I think is playing a little better than might have been expected, and they're getting some results here and there. But the fact that they're still below the playoff line, far below it, not going to make the playoffs, I think Buffalo fans are well aware that everything's okay. They're getting ready for the draft and what might happen at the entry draft, and they'll be looking to add draft picks at the deadline if they're able to do that, right? Carolina, the last team, and they go right here. Carolina fans pretty happy with how things are going because when they were missing half of their blue line, they still played pretty darn well. They had that really nice road trip. So yeah, Carolina finishes things out. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always, regarding said panic index. Did I get it right? Did I get it wrong? Let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.